Every kitchen needs a bread knife, but do you really need a $300 bread knife? Stick around to find out. I'm Nathan, one of the knife nerds at Knifewear, where we sharpen your mind about Japanese knives. Today, I'm going to walk you through the world of Japanese bread knives, and we're going to explore some different styles, a few things you might not expect, even a couple surprises, and a couple styles of bread knife that you've never even seen before. So this is a bread knife, obviously, but this is probably a very familiar style of bread knife that I bet you've seen before, and you probably even have one in your own home. It's got very traditional serrations that kind of go in arches, like so, and these little teeth are great because they really rip through the crust of bread really effectively, and they're pretty tough, so they stay sharp for a long time. Now, the reason you might want a Japanese bread knife is because Japanese knives are made from much harder steel, which means they stay sharp way longer and they get a lot sharper. So they don't need sharpening as often, and they just cut so much better. This is a nice basic bread knife from Tojiro. If you're looking for something cheap and cheerful that's still gonna kick your other bread knives to the curb, this is a great way to go. Now this is something a little bit different. This guy is made with what we call a scalloped edge. Instead of having those really aggressive pointy teeth along the edge, it's got these nice little wavy curves along the edge of the knife. And so that makes it a lot more gentle on what you're cutting. So if you're cutting a really fragile slice of white bread or a beautiful fluffy croissant, or you're a pastry chef and you need to cut maybe a cake in half horizontally, this is going to be a much more gentle knife that's not going to create a whole ton of crumbs, a big mess. It's not going to tear up whatever you're cutting. This is another one from Tojiro, and it's one of my personal favorites. Nice and long, gentle, but still razor sharp. Now at the beginning of the video, I asked you why you might want to spend a few $100s on a bread knife. This guy's the answer. This is a MIYABI. It's a Damascus bread knife, so it's super sexy looking. It's gonna fit right in right next to all your other handmade Japanese kitchen knives and just looks stunning on your knife magnet. But it also performs like crazy. This is the sports car, the Ferrari of bread knives. It's got really, really hard steel, and so it's gonna stay sharp longer than most of the other options out there, which means you're essentially never gonna have to sharpen it. You can cut hundreds, if not thousands of loaves of really rocky, crusty sourdough from your favorite baker, but you can also cut other really crusty things because of these aggressive teeth. If you need to get into like a beautiful porchetta that you've roasted all day and you've got that really tough, crispy crackling on the outside, this guy's not gonna have any trouble breaking through it and getting those nice, clean slices for you. And you're not gonna end up chipping the edge on your Tsujihiki or Yanagiba or whatever beautiful knife you usually like to use to carve, you know, those beautiful roast pieces of meat. Now I promised to show you a couple of bread knives that you've never seen before. So if you like, follow me down the rabbit hole of weird and unusual bread knives, and we're gonna really delve into stuff that you've probably never seen before, but it might just become your kitchen best friend. I like to start off with the SHUN offset bread knife. This guy, super kind of rad look to it. You know, looks like a guitar from an 80s hair metal band. But what I really love about it is two main things. It's got this offset to it, which gives your knuckles clearance on the cutting board if you're using the knife a lot, and it's got this really nice scallop blade that I mentioned before, and so it cuts really aggressively, but without the shredding that you would get from a more aggressive serration on your bread knife. And so this guy is going to be the best friend of anybody that owns a sandwich shop, works in a diner, you know, anywhere that you're using a bread knife all day long, cutting pieces of toast, cutting BLTs, you know, anything really that requires a bread knife. It's gonna save your wrist a lot of discomfort, and it's gonna make getting into those sandwiches without destroying them really, really easy. You're gonna end up with nicer looking food. So I saved the best for last. This guy is something you almost only ever see at Knifewear. This is a partially serrated bread knife. So you've got those really traditional trademark serrations that you see on any bread knife, but they're only on the first couple of inches here. The idea is if you have a loaf of bread, for example, with a really tough crust, but a really beautiful fluffy inside, obviously like, you know, handmade artisan sourdough, the tip is gonna break through that crust really aggressively, but then the rest of that knife can just gently glide right through that beautiful bread without shredding it up. That is really the biggest downfall of a more traditional bread knife, is you're gonna end up creating a lot of crumbs and you're not gonna have as nice of a texture on your bread. Now for average run-of-the-mill bread, maybe that doesn't matter too much. But if you're really investing the money in buying these beautiful artisan loaves of sourdough, or better yet, you've learned to make your own sourdough and you want to respect it, use a knife that's got serrations on the front and just a nice slicing blade on the back. This is really the mullet of bread knives. Business in the front, party in the back. Now with most bread knives, you wouldn't want to slice into anything really that's not bread. On a tomato or a nice piece of roast meat, those serrations are just going to rip it up and destroy it. But with a partially serrated bread knife, it's got a lot more function than just getting into bread and other baked goods. See, this tip, like I mentioned earlier, is really great for breaking into hard crusts, but the back end of the knife is basically just a tsujihiki, a Japanese slicing knife. So if you've got, for example, a piece of roast beef and it's got a nice crust on it that you spent time perfecting, you're not going to want to shred the whole thing, but you're going to need a bit of a tooth to get through that crust. So use the tip of the knife to break into the crust of the roast beef and use the rest of the knife to do the rest of the work. Same goes if you've got a beautiful brisket that you've spent all day smoking, or really anything that's hard and rocky on the outside, but nice and soft on the inside. So there you have it. A few different knives, all of which are good for bread, some even good for other baked goods, or even meat in some cases. Bread knives are really specially designed knives for specific purposes. But did you know that we have other specially designed knives at Knifewear as well? We've got one that is the ultimate everyday carry knife, specifically designed to fit in your pocket and be used for any daily task. The legendary Higo no Kami is a very traditional style of Japanese folding knife, and it is perfect for anything from opening up Amazon packages to making feather sticks at your campsite to just cutting a bit of lunch at work. Check out this next video all about the legendary Higo no Kami.